Hi, my name is Matt Kendricks. I'm the project lead for dSIPRouter. So today we'll be talking about dSIPRouter 0.64, which is the latest release of dSIPRouter. Today I'll be joined by members of the dSIPRouter development team to go through the new features. So let's talk about the agenda for today. The first thing I'm going to do is give you an intro to dSIPRouter. So if you're new to the project, I want to at least give you a good understanding of where the project came from and the core components of dSIPRouter. Then we'll jump into the updates to this release. So the updates really consist of a set of UI enhancements, enhanced OS support that the community has been asking us about, enhanced cloud support, update to Microsoft Teams support, and also update to how we process inbound calls. And then what we'll do is jump into the roadmap and kind of give you an understanding of what the next set of releases are going to look like, and kind of give you some understanding of why we're adding certain features to dSIPRouter. So let's jump into the intro. So what is dSIPRouter? So it's really a GUI for implementing Chameleon. It's a very opinionated way of implementing Chameleon. As we all know, Chameleon has 200 plus modules, I think, and they really leave it to you to figure out how to actually put these modules together to basically achieve your requirement. So what we do is actually take a look at the modules that we see that are most critical, are most important for implementing really three different use cases. The one is around SIP trunking, right? So a lot of ITSPs want to offer some level of SIP trunking service to their customers. Also, we have folks that want to be able to sell extensions, or usually we call PBX hosting, right? They want to be able to host PBXs for their customers. And as they grow their business, they need a way to basically provide an abstraction layer to these actual PBXs that they're hosting. So they can do maintenance updates, or if they want to do some load balancing. There's a number of reasons why you will want something to sit in front of these PBXs. And then lastly is that Microsoft Teams has become, especially due to the pandemic, has become a more critical piece to an organization's communication strategy. So what we wanted to do was make sure that these organizations can leverage their existing infrastructure and their existing investment in their VoIP infrastructure. So we provide a connector that allows you to interconnect Microsoft Teams to your existing VoIP infrastructure. The core components of dSIPRouter is the UI, right? So that's probably the major component that people use dSIPRouter for. The UI is built in Python, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on in this session. Obviously, Chameleon, RTP engine is optional, but it's very critical in situations where you don't want the endpoint to communicate directly to the backend media server for a number of different reasons. So RTP engine can handle the communication between the endpoint and and Chameleon being in the middle and to the backend media server. And then there's a set of bash scripts that are used to handle the installation and configuration of all the components inside of dSIPRouter. Also, what we've added recently is a is Nginx to our architecture. So now Nginx is being used, like many other projects use it, as a robust HTTP engine. So we're no longer going to be using the built-in HTTP server that comes with Python. We will be using Nginx. So for folks out there that have been familiar with the project and use the project, this is a great improvement to the overall stability of the UI. So we're very excited about that. Lastly, we also installed Docker during the installation of dSIPRouter. So right now we have a couple of modules that we're leveraging, but basically the Docker component is used for us to, the whole intent is to use it to distribute enhancements or plugins to dSIPRouter. So we have a couple today. In particular, probably the most popular one is a plugin that allows you to use dSIPRouter as a provisioning server. So basically, or provisioning proxy is probably a better way of putting it. So it'll take the request. So you can have your phones, you can set your phones up so that the provisioning server is dSIPRouter. dSIPRouter will then proxy that request to the backend media servers. Now, the only media server that is supported right now is Fusion PBX. But the goal is, as we get more requirements and more customer needs, we'll support other backend servers as well. So that's a little bit about the project, a little bit about the core components of the project. Just to give you a little point of reference, is that the project started in 2017. So now we're going on, I guess now we're going on 3 years, right? So we're super excited, and I'm really excited about you to hear about 0.64. So let's jump right into the new enhancements inside 0.64. We'll start with the UI components, and I'll let Tyler jump in there.
Yeah, no problem. So the UI enhancements, we were really focused on kind of upgrading our server stack in this release here. So the goals were keeping the stability, performance, and security very high, but keeping that ease of use the same as it was before. So when we started out with dSIPRouter, it was basically based on the Flask microframework, and we were using the Python app server served over this Flask HTTP server. So that's kind of like the beginner startup server. And as we've grown the project and as it's matured, we've needed more stability from our HTTP server and just better performance and reliable security. So that's kind of why we were moving away from the beginner stuff and in the Flask HTTP server, moving on to Nginx and some bigger stuff. We also, for this release, put the documentation straight into the web app. So before, we were just redirecting to an external site that we were hosting. Now it's going to be all packaged in one. Your documentation is built into the app. So basically, this is what the infrastructure or the architecture looks like now for the HTTP services that we're serving for the GUI app and the API server. Now the user is coming into Nginx, and Nginx is providing that reliable security with the HTTPS services, and they're just reverse proxying that over to this Bjorn app server. And the Bjorn app server is kind of like a very, very fast, very reliable app server that we can depend on. And we're using that over domain sockets now as well. So that's another big change. That's just another performance increase over TCP sockets on the back end. And all of this just kind of puts the package together into a more reliable server stack. And now you won't be seeing these problems that you would before with that simple Flask HTTP server, where it just doesn't seem as stable. You can't have a lot of requests going at once. and some of the SSL bugs. All of those are going to be fixed in this release here with Nginx.
Yeah, and to be explicit around that, so the bugs that people were seeing was basically after a few days, that basically the UI would just stop responding. And now with this new architecture, based on our test, you won't have that problem. So that's one of the really the core benefit with this enhancement. So.
All right, and for the built-in documentation, we are kind of implementing the same exact thing we were before. This isn't a super fluid transition yet, but it's still being worked on. So basically, right now, we moved all that stuff that was in read the docs on an external site, and it's all packaged into the app server. And we're using Sphinx to generate all that documentation. You're using the same exact nice format that you had with read the docs, all that highlighting in Jazz. It's all the exact same, just built right in. We'll kind of cover, I got a little demo here. If you hit the play button on that video here, we'll just kind of look at, what it looks like. It's just through your dashboard here. And there's 3 sections: the user, developer, and API documentation. So you can see the user documentation is just your regular old documentation we have on the website right now on the read the docs. And it's all accessible right there through your dashboard. And then if you're a developer, you can kind of look through the developer docs. We're not going to go too far into that, but basically it kind of shows some of the backend workings of the app server. And then the API documentation just shows API documentation, the routes for any developer sysadmins that are going to utilize that. And this will be worked on in the future and made to look a little bit nicer and more usable. But this is kind of where we're headed with this, and making this much more usable by packaging in the app server was a big change for this release.
And let me add to that, if you don't mind, is that the reason why we're kind of moving down this route is because a couple of different reasons. One is because we want to make it a lot easier for people to actually find the documentation they need. It doesn't matter if they're a user or if they are a developer that want to actually contribute to the project, which we definitely need more contributors. So we're trying to make it much easier for people to understand how the pieces fit together. And then also for people who want to integrate with us. So that's the routes that you saw. So we want more people being able to leverage it in a fashion that makes it more of a, making dSIPRouter more of a programmable component in their architecture. So we would love people to be able to drop dSIPRouter into their infrastructure and then be able to programmatically via the RESTful API, be able to do all the things that you do via the GUI, because we understand the value of being able to operate on dSIPRouter leveraging an API. So that's kind of that's really the end goal, is to get more people leveraging those 3 components. So let me go to OS support. All right. So a lot of work was done here. We've got a lot of feedback from people. So we have Richard Balaji. Did I get it right?
Yeah.
There it is, Balaji, with us, who acts as not only as a software developer who helped on the OS support side, but he also acting as our community manager, meaning that, really we're trying to build more of the engagement up in our community. But we'll get back to that in a little bit. So Richard, tell us a little bit about some of the new stuff for OS support, and just take us through it a little bit.
All right. So for OS support, we added Debian 10 now, and also CentOS 8. We had CentOS 7 before, but it was outdated and needed to be fixed. So we went and fixed the bugs for that as well. So now that's up and running. With Debian 10, it included numerous software packages that were updated, like Python 3, MariaDB, and SystemMD. And then network filtering is based on NF tables frameworks by default in Debian 10. And then for CentOS 7, that uses IP tables packet filtering framework. And also Python 3 is now available for CentOS 7. And then CentOS 8 uses NF tables. for the packet filtering framework, and the Yum package manager is now based on DNF for CentOS 8, so it kind of makes the install process a bit faster.
Cool. So and I guess and the kind of some of the value there, well, the takeaway in this is that it takes a lot of time and energy for us to support these different versions, different OSs, I'm sorry. And I think Richard did a great job with some help from Tyler as well to really come up with, three strong OS support for these three platforms and made it very strong in regards to like being able to install quickly, being able to, well, as quick as possible, right? So we know CentOS 7 is a little bit, CentOS 8 takes a little bit longer to install, but there's more stuff to install. But we've tried to make the experience the same on all those different platforms. In order to do that, underneath the covers, we're spending a lot of time hiding some of the complexity away from you. So when I say strong, we've made it so that it's a strong, each version, each operating system we support gives the same level of support across all of the platform, all of dSIPRouter. So that's really was really the key thing that we wanted to ensure that we do.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, Mac, we also we still maintain backwards compatibility with the older versions of Debian that we support.
Yes, that's very true. Yes, thank you. That's very good. All right, so let's move on to cloud support. And I think this kind of happened last minute, but I think we've been having a lot of people, and I think Richard will agree, a lot of people have been wanting to use, I don't even know how to say it. Is it Vultr? Is that how you say it?
Vultr?
Vultr? Okay. We don't even know how to say it, but we know that there's been a lot of people that want to use it. And we've in our forums, there's been people asking about it. It doesn't work, the way they handle things. So maybe Tyler, just talk to us a little bit about that support and how it went with adding support for our Vultr.
Yeah, so since the advent of like the cloud infrastructure, all of these cloud providers have been, well, I guess cloud support in general has been a very big important piece of app development. So whenever you're deploying your app, you have so many choices nowadays. And for an app developer, that means that you have to take into consideration the different infrastructure that you're building this on. So for Vultr in this case, they don't use valid DNS. They use a pseudo DNS. So that was one big difference between them. And all these different cloud platforms have different quirks like that. So that's something that people have to consider if they're going to be deploying on like DigitalOcean or deploying on bare metal or deploying on VMware. There's all these little quirks and differences. So it takes us, more time to test out all these different platforms. And then to have that automated, be able to do that over several different OS, it takes a lot of time. So adding in Vultr to the mix, we have, I think now it's about 5 cloud providers that we validated and supported out of the box. As more people move to other platforms, I know Linode is another one that a lot of people have been starting to move over to as well for hosting. So they're probably in the pipeline. And of course, the big names like AWS, DigitalOcean, and Google Cloud, Amazon, all of them. So basically it's just we updated all of that, added Vultr to the mix. Any other issues that come up with the new cloud providers we'll be looking into as well as people move out to them. We're open to suggestions. If people want to add that in, they're welcome to add PRs as well.
Cool, thank you. And so I think the big issue here for those that don't understand is that when we actually do the install process, we actually need a valid DNS name for a number of different components that we're installing. So if we can't get a valid DNS name from the actual OS platform that we're running on or the cloud platform we're running on, then we need to do something to fulfill that requirement. So in this case, are we just using the host name of the box, Tyler? Is that how we're doing it?
Yep. In this case, we're using the host name of the box, and everything else resolves the IPs.
Okay, great. So, all right, cool. That's very good to know. Let's keep moving here. All right, so Microsoft Teams support. What do we do here? There really was no good way of actually depicting this without confusing everybody. But for those who don't know, in order to, one of the things we've been getting asked about is like, how do we transfer calls when we're using dSIPRouter with the Microsoft Teams module? Well, in order to support refers, you really need to a back-to-back user agent, like in order to support it like completely, right? So we're not prepared to actually integrate a back-to-back user agent into dSIPRouter just yet. But so what we found that we could do at least is give people the ability to transfer calls within the Teams infrastructure. So that means that if you receive a call inbound from dSIPRouter into Microsoft Teams, and then you wanted to transfer that call to another user in Microsoft Teams, you can now do that. And likewise, if you're, I think we'll just stop there. I think that's probably the biggest piece of this that people have been asking us for. We're still looking at the probability or the possibility of being able to add a full-blown back-to-back user agent, but that decision hasn't been made yet. The other thing that we really was, another big feature that people wanted was the ability to do call routing based on something other than the request URI. So what happened is that we had a number of customers that were using different carriers, and these carriers were usually outside of the US. And these carriers, for some reason, a lot of them wanted dSIPRouter to register to them. That's one, which we've been supporting the ability to register to carriers for a while. But the thing that we found is that when these actual carriers wanted us to register, it wanted to actually send the call back down to the username that we sent for the registration. So versus actually sending the actual phone number that they're trying to call or the DID in the request URI, they were just having it in the to header. So we found that Asterisk and in particular Free PBX actually handled this without a problem. And customers kind of wanted the same behavior from dSIPRouter. So now for any calls coming from a carrier inside dSIPRouter, we will first try and route on the request URI. If we cannot route on the request URI, we will then try and route on the to header. I think this is just a feature that will make, especially people outside of the US, make it much easier for them to work and leverage and use dSIPRouter versus having to do some modifications. Because the other way you would do this today, you would use the enrichment framework that we released a few releases ago that allows you to modify calls that comes in from a carrier. That feature is great, but that means you have to kind of get into understanding how to code Chameleon. So this feature here allows you to get up and going and receive calls without having to do anything from day one once you install it. Okay, so the last thing we're going to talk about really quickly is our roadmap. So the roadmap is really, you can see it here is that, there you go. Let me move this down and away. It will not go away. I will just minimize it and then go this way. Okay. So right now we're in November and we just had the 0.64 release. The next major release is in March 2021, and that's 0.70. And what we're gonna have here is security. We're gonna add multi-user support. So we've been getting requests from some people. We haven't been getting a lot, but I think this is gonna be important down the road as we kind of grow the project, is to be able to have multiple people log into dSIPRouter, having a kind of start down the path of having an audit log to figure out what things were changed by who. It's going to be important. The other thing we're going to do in 7.0 is really enhance our Fusion PBX support. So two things is one, affinity support, which I'm not sure if we've been getting feedback around this, but what that option, what this is the ability so that dSIPRouter will, if you have a cluster of Fusion PBX systems or instances, it will figure out the best place to route calls to based on the performance of that particular server. So in your cluster, you may have, in your Fusion PBX cluster, you may have servers that are of different sizes, meaning that, you may have one that has 8 cores versus one that has 20 cores, and so on and so forth from a specs perspective. What the affinity support allows you to do is it allows dSIPRouter to kind of get a pulse on how certain servers are performing and then route the actual calls for a particular Fusion domain to a particular Fusion PBX instance. Now, this particular feature, we haven't really flushed out all the way because we're finding that a lot of customers have a Fusion PBX cluster and all the machines are typically about the same size. So it may not make much sense to actually have this affinity support, but we're still collecting data. So if you have some input or feedback around this, please let us know. The other thing is the auto-homing capability. So auto-homing is really around, again, is around really deciding if, for example, if this particular Fusion PBX server is going to be used for conferencing, you can actually have it, when the Fusion PBX server is actually introduced into dSIPRouter or you set it up, you can actually have dSIPRouter keep track of, let's say, all the users that's part of this conference room, and you can have all the users like be forwarded to this particular Fusion PBX server. So basically, it's just, it automatically figures out the proper home for a particular set of services inside of Fusion PBX, and then will always route traffic to that particular home. Now, at the same time, like if that server goes away for some reason or dies or there's some issue, dSIPRouter will figure out a new home, right? So now and then any additional new calls or services will be routed to a new Fusion PBX server. Lastly is that we'll be adding the ability to do a upgrade through the GUI, which I think, I think that people will appreciate, because right now the upgrade process is via the command line, and we haven't spent a lot of energy and time really going through that process. We knew, or making this process very robust via the UI, via the GUI right now. I'm sorry, via the UI, via the command line right now. We will be, because we knew we were going to be focusing on a GUI upgrade process. So we're going to really be focused on trying to make this experience very easy to use, really making it so that you will be able to be notified when new updates are available and make it more of a one-click update. The other thing that we want to do is add in-app purchases. As you guys know, we're an open source project, and really the only funding that we really receive is really through the sale of our Microsoft Teams module and through people wanting us to implement features for them. But there's so many different enhancements or little apps, for lack of better words, that or features that we could be providing folks. Or better yet, it may be a set of people out there that want to develop features for dSIPRouter, and we want to make it so that people can, download these new apps and make some type of kind of like
Like a marketplace.
yeah, thank you for the word. Yeah, marketplace. I couldn't think of the word. Marketplace, yes. Kind of like a marketplace that we can actually have apps on there for people can actually buy, sell, and all that good stuff. So the last thing that we're gonna do in 7.0 is really bump up our Camilio support. I think we're gonna go to 5.4 in 7.0. I mean, depending on where they are in release cycle of Camilio, we may be going up to something above 5.4, but we'll see as we get closer to once this release gets closer to the date of release, we'll figure out which version of Camilio we'll grab. I think that's really it. One quick thing is that we are going to have another release of 0.64. This is going to be called 0.641. It'll probably come out in the late December timeframe, early January. And the whole goal here is to really focus on any bug fixes we need to do right around 0.64 that are small. And secondly, we're going to add enhanced support for Fusion PBX clusters. So we have a set of customers out there that are using dSIPRouter, and in particular using it to proxy calls to Fusion PBX. We do a good job of making the process easy to set up, but we want to make it more sophisticated in regards to the type of use cases that we support. So it's going to be really focused on Fusion PBX customers that are set up in clusters. So we're going to make that experience way better. So I think that's really all we have for this this update here. If you want to contribute to dSIPRouter, you can actually go to dSIPRouter.org, and you can actually click on the links and it'll take you to our GitHub page, and you can actually contribute to the project. We'll be setting up on our GitHub a sponsorship mechanism inside of GitHub. So if you wanted to sponsor the project, you'll be able to do that from GitHub. And then if you wanted to, you want us to implement dSIPRouter in your environment, you also can purchase support hours or a annual support contract, and we can help you implement it for your use cases.
If you guys have questions for us, anything, you can find us right now on the support forums. So the forums are in the Google forums. We'll be kind of changing that in the future and adding some more ways for you guys to reach out to us. Richard can probably talk on that a little bit more. You can also, if you guys have a big project you want us to work on, or a feature that you guys don't want to implement and you want us to implement it, you can check out dopensource.com and grab support there, and then just plan out the project with us.
I mean, yeah, we'll be adding more ways you guys can reach out to us.
Cool. All right. Well, good stuff. No, that's good stuff. I really appreciate, Tyler and Richard, for you guys being available to actually talk about dSIPRouter 0.64. And we'll talk to everyone later. Take care.